What's up? Joe from J Studios here. In this video, I have 1 week to build a makeup vanity surprise Valentine's gift. I'm going to use this white oak slab I've had laying around in the shop. So let's get down to it. So I bought this slab probably 5-6 months ago, but I'd had my eye on it for a while. Every time I went to the lumber yard, I always thought it was just a cool piece they had sitting around. And then eventually one day I just asked about it. And I was like, hey, what do you want for this? And ended up getting a really good deal. I think this slab cost me $80, a little over 2 inches thick, and then I think it was like 44, 45 long, and then it was like 30 wide, 33 wide. So pretty significant. Obviously, I can't run that through my planer. I only have a 13-inch planer. The lumberyard was able to mill it for me. They went ahead and skip planed it through their big 24-inch grizzly planer when I went up there. Would have took a video of that, but the guy's pants were sagging and you can see his butt. And then trying to get monetized here, and that's definitely not going to help. So while I was there, I also picked up this 8/4 white oak and this 4/4 white oak. The 8/4 is going to be the legs, and then the 4/4 will make up the cabinet carcass and the drawer faces themselves. Once I finished the milling process, just went and stacked and stickered all my dimensional lumber, let it acclimate to the shop a little bit more, and then I did leave it a little thick just in case I needed to go back and mill it up some more just to flatten it back out. Now the way I built this vanity was kind of in a weird order. I didn't have any plans. I kind of made it up as I went. The slab was kind of the basis for it, so that limited design and kind of function and overall size. Just had to base everything off of that. And like I said, I wanted the legs and the carcass itself to be inset from the edge detail, so I had to go ahead and do that early on. Normally I would wait to do this later as I've gone through the sanding process, and this way the edges stay nice and crisp. But to keep going, you wanted to go ahead and get that routed on there as best I could. Did that in 2 passes. This was a 22.5 degree chamfer bit I got from Rockler. This one did work great. Didn't have any issues with it. Just had to dial my speed in a little bit and take a couple passes. Now the C-channels are absolutely not necessary for a piece of this size. This is more, I just wanted to try it out for practice because the next thing I'm going to be building is going to be a big walnut slab table, and that is more than likely going to need some C-channels. So I kind of wanted to do a test run now, see how it went, see what issues I run into, see if I need to change anything. I made a quick template out of MDF, and now if you notice, the router keeps like skipping on me. Well, it's because I'm not paying attention. I'm making it up as I go. And I'm doing what is called a climb cut with a router, which is exactly what you don't want to do. So basically when you cut the outside of an object, you want to go counterclockwise. When you cut the inside, or like inside of a circle or anything like that, you want to go clockwise. So that way the router is going the correct direction against the grain and not jumping around. I quickly realized it as soon as I started editing this video, that the mistake I had made. But I'd like to be a lesson to you guys. Inside, go clockwise, outside, counterclockwise, and you should be just fine. Once I started doing it that way, it was all good. And then once the C-channels were recessed, I went ahead and marked and drilled for some threaded inserts. So I'm going to be using machine little bolts to go ahead and hold these T-tracks in place. Now, I was kind of rushing when I did these, so these aren't the cleanest. I could definitely do better in the next run, but that's really the main reason I did it. Really just to get good practice, learn a little bit from it, and then be ready for the real thing when that dining table comes, which if you follow me over on Instagram at J Studios, you'll have actually seen some of these sneak peeks added to my stories. So definitely go check that out there. Now, if you guys like this video, if you've gotten anything from it, the one thing I do ask is that please just subscribe, leave a comment. The engagement really helps me. I'm trying to grow this channel. It's been going in a great direction, getting a lot more traffic and views, and I really thank you guys for that. Without you guys, it wouldn't be possible. So thanks. So here I'm just cross-cutting the sides and the back for the vanity. So it's all going to be continuous grain flow around. And then I want the drawer face itself to sit flush with that edge profile that we had cut. So the easiest way to do this is just to take relative measurements. I could take a tape measure and do all of that, but odds are you're just going to mess it up. So I'm using an offcut that's the exact same thickness as the drawer fronts I'm going to use to mark where the inset will be. And then I'm just going to go ahead and square that up, make sure it's right. Relative measuring is so much more accurate than going ahead and just trying to do everything to the exact thing you drew out or any of the cases like that. Just because you're going to have compound errors, you have curve cuts that take away from it, you have just human error as far as measuring and accuracy. But doing it this way, like I said, you get a nice perfect fit, lines right up. As far as hooking all these together, super simple. I used my domino on the sides and the middle pieces, but it totally wasn't necessary. I also went ahead and drilled pocket holes off camera for attaching the slab top. So you absolutely, for the sides and back piece, you can definitely use pocket holes to attach those as well. It'll be super strong because you're going to add glue to those joints anyways. And then you're already in there with that. I don't know. Sometimes my brain's all over the place. Again, I'm making this in a week here. Not really sure where I'm going. And then I also decided to change it up, and I picked up some Type Bond Original to try. Clamped it all up and checked for square. I said, took a little finagly just because there's not a front on it. Sometimes I wanted to bow and warp, so just enough pressure to close it up. All right. Now I need to start working on the drawers. I'm going to be using some undermount drawer slides, and I'm using 1/2-inch maple plywood that I already had in the shop. Since I had the foresight to make both openings the same, both of my drawers will be the exact same size. And then so I'm just setting up my stop block on my miter gauge. Now the best way I found to get accurate, repeatable cuts with your stop block and make sure the measurements are right is line up that ruler or that tape measure to that inside of that tooth, because that's going to tell you exactly where the blade and that cut's going to start and the blade's going to hit. So just something to keep in mind. And then I went ahead and put a 1/4-inch dado in the bottom of all my drawer pieces to hold the panels, and then cross cut the drawer faces to length. Now I had some nice white oak for these, but as you'll see later on, I may or may not have messed these up, but we'll talk about that when we get there. So time to start working on the legs. First thing I had to go do was square up the ends, get all of those dimensionally the same, and then we can start figuring out our tapers and splays and all that kind of jazz. Now, since I didn't have any plans or concrete idea of what I wanted this thing to look like, just a rough idea and a deadline that was getting much, much closer, it took me a little bit to figure out kind of the taper I liked on these legs. I think I ended up going with about 3 inches in the top to 2 inches at the base, somewhere in that range. If you decide you want to make something similar, that's kind of where I started, and then I dialed it in from there. Now the front legs are also going to get a 10-degree splay just to give them a little more attitude, a little more character. So once I had the miter gauge set to that, got my first cut established. So I pretty much made this first leg first, and then I came through with the second leg and used stops and got everything mirrored. Now if you're going to do a splay, whatever angle you cut on one side, you have to cut opposite on the other end if you want it to be parallel with the rest of your cabinet or your carcass or whatever you're making. Now I use that little 1, 2, 3 block just to get everything centered the same, and then I'm able to remove it so that way this piece isn't getting wedged between the blade and the fence, which if you're not familiar with table saw safety, it's a big no-no. It can really cause some serious potential kickback. It can mess the piece up. It's just dangerous and not recommended. So just keep that in mind. Now if you've seen any of my other videos, you're familiar with what I'm doing here. So we're going to be making a down and dirty tapering jig with this. So I establish a clean edge with the table saw fence. Don't touch this fence until I'm done with this process. But now we have a clean edge. We know exactly where the blade is going to cut. So now I can line up my tapers off of that edge and then set some stops on there so it's all repeatable for both legs. Pretty simple setup. Like I said, I use this thing all the time and repurpose it. I'm actually going to do it for the front and back legs. But this is just going to go ahead and clean up those rough bandsaw marks that we left behind, since we obviously weren't as accurate as, a linear setup like this. So just taking my time. I did go ahead and order toggle clamps. So for the safety police out there, yes, I agree. It wasn't the best way to do that, but I did order toggle clamps. They're here now. So the next time I build this, if I have a sketchy cut like that, I'll be able to lock it down securely and keep my hands way away from the blade. Because I definitely didn't like doing this, even with the saw stop. Not a fun thing to do. So just be careful, guys. These legs are going to get a shoulder cut, or you're going to basically half lap them with the sides themselves. It's going to be a super strong joint, and it's very easy to do. So I'm just using another piece of that white oak that is the exact same height as the cabinet and carcass itself, and then using a marking knife so that way it's the tightest tolerance I can get. And then for transferring it to the sides, you can see how I set that marking knife right in that little line that we had cut, line my square up to it. It's a super accurate way to transfer your marks. When it comes to setting the height for your table saw blade, using another offcut piece that is the exact same thickness as the sides themselves. And I didn't go full bore. I did a couple test cuts just to dial it in really nice. And then if you do splays on your legs, make sure you match that angle with your miter gauge when you go to cut these dados out so everything lines up. An easy way to check yourself if you're getting confused by the angles is that if you slide that piece over, the end of it should sit flush right against your fence before you start cutting. It's a good way to double check and make sure that you're on the up and up. With all of that cut, decided to go ahead and add the edge profiles for these legs now. Just doing a 1/2 inch round over to the outsides of these legs. I'm not going everywhere, and I'm not doing the insides because I don't want my joints to look funny when it's time to glue it up. And it's time to glue it up, so lining everything up. I'm going to be using some 18 gauge brad nails just to kind of hold it in place. With these pieces being long and heavy like that, and then also having these angles, they kind of wanted to slip around with the glue. So I sent a couple of those in while I clamped it on. Never going to see them, they're on the inside. So nothing wrong with doing it that way. You can also send some screws from the inside. Just make sure to leave yourself some room for that drawer hardware. Definitely don't want to forget about that. And then while I'm out here routing and sanding and making a big mess, went ahead and added an 1/8 inch round over to the front and sides. The back of this slab, while it was cool and it had some figuring and stuff, there was a chunk that was tore out at some point. So I used a 1/4 inch round over on that. And it'll also make it a little bit cleaner for cable management. This is going to have a powered mirror on it. So just run it back there. Now, I'd actually went to Rockler and I bought two 12-inch undermount drawer slides, but they didn't fit because my math sucks because I'm making this up as I go. So I had to rush order a set of 9-inch Bloom slides. Luckily, those came in. And now that they're here, literally a day before it needs to be done, I can go ahead and finish building my drawers out, assemble them. Now, these were super simple. A little bit of glue, and then a couple brad nails to hold it in place. Can't get any simpler than that. Now, if you're unfamiliar with undermount drawer slides, they require these little plastic clips that get screwed into the bottom of the drawer. This locks the drawer in place, but it's also going to give you some adjustability. So I'm using a self-centering drill bit to drill those holes so that way they're nice and centered. Now, I had a Cobalt one that was actually pretty decent and cheap. That one's been lost and I haven't been able to find it, so I picked up a Ryobi one from Home Depot, and it's terrible. It was like $6, but I don't even think it was worth $6. It doesn't reset most of the time. The shavings get caught in there, so which all just throws off your accuracy. Keep stopping, keep fixing it. It's a pain. Don't buy it. Anyways, to go ahead and line the drawer slides up as easy as I could, I just clamped a scrap piece to the underside of where they needed to go. Gave me a little ledge for them to sit on while I pre-drilled and sent all the screws in. Once I had those done, went ahead and attached the drawer faces. Now, I prematurely cut the drawer faces to cut the reveals without thinking about it or any consideration. And I don't realize how much I didn't like it until I got the top put on after I'd already installed them and cut the edge profiles. So that was a pretty bonehead move. The grain was really nice on these two drawer fronts, and the pieces I replaced them with I didn't like as much, so that sucked. But that's what happens when you make things up as you go. Now to finish this, I'm using Rubio Monocoat Antique Bronze. It's the same finish I use on that mid-century round table. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link it above. Definitely go check it out after this one. It's a really fun build. But if you're unfamiliar with Rubio, you just buff it on with the white Scotch-Brite pad, let it sit 15-20 minutes, and then buff it off until that towel comes dry or that rag, whatever you use. Super simple. Love the way it comes out, and I love being able to feel the grain through it, especially for a piece like this, which has this slab top and white oak legs. There's a lot of character. But once I let that cure, to finish the drawers, I just used some water-based polyurethane. Didn't want these obviously to be yellow like the rest of the stuff, so a couple coats of that real quick. All right, so today is the day. Everything is done. It is all cured. Finishes dry on the drawers. So now it's time to reassemble, get it in place before she gets home in a couple hours. So let's get to it. Finally time to attach this base to the top. So just getting everything lined up. Now, if I had had foresight and planned this thing out normally, I would have lined up the pocket holes where they were easier to get to than with those drawer slides installed. I just figured it'd be easier to install the drawer slides with the top off, which it was, but then made the pocket holes harder to get to. So nothing too bad, but definitely could have made it easier myself. Now I'm going to show you the easiest way I've found to mark for the center of a board, and then also mark for your drawer hardware. So basically you want to get it to the nearest whole inch or centimeter or whatever you're using, and then you want to count how many between, divide that by 2, so that gives you your halfway point, and then you'll do that for both ends, and then you'll have a little T intersection, and that is the center of your board. Now we're using 3" on center drawer hardware, so we're going to center that there, and then we're going to mark 1.5 inches on each edge along that line. And using an awl, we're going to go ahead and mark those out. Now I'm using a little backer board, so when I drill through, I'm not getting blowout in the inside of my drawer. But you follow all that, everything will line up perfect, and you'll have nice centered drawer hardware. Pretty simple. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. Oh look, first YouTube video I made on that little stool. Not a great video, but definitely worth a watch. Check it out, or check out some of my other stuff. I don't know how, but I made it the entire week and got this thing built, and she didn't know anything about it. I mean, I would hide it behind the workbench when I wasn't in the garage working. But now we were just got to go ahead and get it set up because she's about to be home. So as soon as she got home, I threw a mic on her, which absolutely threw her for a loop, and she was totally on guard, didn't know what to expect. In the room. Yeah.
Oh my gosh! Oh, you made it? You built
Yeah.
it?
Sure did.
Oh my gosh, I don't understand it with my makeup anymore.
Well, her reaction made it absolutely worth all the hours I put in the shop cramming to get this thing done. Super happy with how it came out. Thank you guys again so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys next time. Also, I'd like to give a little bit of credit to those of you guys who made it all the way to the end of the video. So this week, comment either cats or dogs. Let me know which one you prefer. Thanks, and I'll see you guys next time.